Li Mei sat quietly at her desk in the hospital's accounting department, her slender frame almost disappearing behind stacks of paperwork. The fluorescent lights hummed softly above, casting a sterile glow over the office, highlighting rows of identical cubicles where her colleagues typed away, chatted idly, or scrolled through their phones. She, however, was immersed in numbers, cross-referencing invoices and billing statements with patient records. Her coworkers rarely noticed her presence. Her soft voice and gentle demeanor made her almost invisible in the bustling environment. Even when she offered suggestions during meetings, they were usually dismissed or overlooked. Li Mei had learned long ago that silence was safer than speaking up. Yet that day, as she sifted through the hospital's financial documents, a peculiar pattern caught her eye, one that made her stomach tighten. Initially, she thought it was a simple accounting mistake. A surgery listed on the invoices didn't match the patient registry. Curious, she dug deeper. Another invoice revealed an expensive piece of surgical equipment had been billed twice in the same month. Small discrepancies like these were easy to overlook, but Li Mei's meticulous attention to detail made them glaring. Her pulse quickened as she realized the anomalies were not random errors. They appeared to be deliberate. The numbers suggested that someone had been siphoning money from the hospital's accounts for months, funneling it through shell companies with no real deliveries or services provided. Li Mei's mind raced with questions. Who could be behind this? And why would anyone risk such a bold fraud in a hospital, where scrutiny should have been high? As the afternoon sunlight waned outside the large office windows, Li Mei remained at her desk, determined to follow the trail. She carefully documented each discrepancy, creating a timeline of questionable transactions, noting the dates, amounts, and recipients. Each new piece of evidence painted a clearer picture. The hospital's CEO, Mr. Zhang, a man known for his charm and aggressive business tactics, could very well be orchestrating the scheme. The thought made her both anxious and fearful. Mr. Zhang had a reputation for being unapproachable, even intimidating. Employees rarely questioned his decisions, but Li Mei felt a moral obligation that outweighed her fear. Patients and insurers were being cheated and someone had to act. The office buzzed with the ordinary noises of typing, phone calls, and occasional laughter. But Li Mei was alone in her realization. The solitude of her corner desk seemed to mirror her inner isolation. Nobody could know yet what she had discovered. She leaned back for a moment, closing her eyes and taking a deep breath. This was bigger than her. She was shy, careful, and unassuming, yet in this moment, she felt a surge of determination. She resolved that she would gather all the evidence, prepare for confrontation, and somehow expose the truth. Little did she know that one carefully whispered sentence in Mandarin would soon unravel, a hospital scam so audacious that even the CEO could never have imagined being caught. Li Mei's discovery in the accounting office had set her mind racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that the anomalies she had uncovered were part of something much larger than a few clerical errors. The following morning, she arrived at the hospital early, before the usual chatter of nurses and administrators filled the corridors. With a quiet resolve, she began cross-referencing patient records with billing statements, a task that demanded meticulous attention and an almost obsessive focus. Her eyes scanned row after row of data, comparing dates, treatment codes, and signatures. That's when she noticed a shocking pattern. A number of surgeries listed in the financial statements simply hadn't happened. These weren't minor procedures or routine checkups. They were costly, high-risk surgeries that had been billed to insurance companies and patients alike. Each line item represented thousands of yuan, and the total sum suggested a staggering amount of misappropriated funds. As Li Mei dug deeper, her heart sank. She traced the fraudulent charges to a network of shell companies that had been set up under seemingly legitimate names. Money was funneled from the hospital's accounts into these offshore entities, and then quietly disappeared. It became clear that this wasn't the work of a careless employee or a small-time scam. It pointed directly toward the top. The CEO, Mr. Zhang, was the only one with the authority and access to orchestrate such a complex scheme. The thought made her hands tremble. She had always known Mr. Zhang as a charismatic, confident man who commanded respect, but she had never imagined that he could be capable of such deception. The realization that someone so powerful was exploiting the trust of patients filled her with a mix of fear and righteous anger. Li Mei knew she had to be careful. Any wrong move could put her own job and possibly her safety at risk. She spent hours documenting each discrepancy, creating a detailed, organized trail of evidence that connected the phantom surgeries, the inflated invoices, and the offshore accounts. Each page she compiled made the pattern of corruption impossible to ignore. The office around her was alive with ordinary routines, but Li Mei felt isolated, aware that she carried knowledge that could shake the entire institution. Her normally quiet demeanor was replaced by a tense alertness. She observed every detail, every interaction, as though even a glance from the wrong colleague might reveal her intentions. By late afternoon, the weight of her discovery began to press down on her. Li Mei leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples, trying to process the enormity of what she had uncovered. Millions of yuan were being siphoned off. Patients were being billed for treatments they never received, and the very integrity of the hospital was at stake. She realized she could no longer remain silent. Her shyness, which had kept her in the shadows for years, now felt like a barrier she had to overcome. She had to find a way to expose the fraud, carefully, strategically, and without alerting Mr. Zhang too soon. For the first time in her career, Li Mei felt the stirrings of courage, a quiet determination that even the most powerful figures in the hospital would not be able to ignore. Her next steps would be dangerous, but she understood that the truth had to come out, no matter the personal cost. The boardroom was sleek and imposing, filled with high-ranking executives and investors whose eyes gleamed with ambition and self-interest. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, but inside the tension was palpable. Li Mei sat quietly in a corner, clutching the thick folder that contained her months of painstaking research. She had spent countless nights cross-checking financial statements, verifying patient records, and tracing offshore accounts. Her normally reserved demeanor felt fragile in the presence of so many powerful figures, but she knew that today was critical. The CEO, Mr. Zhang, stood at the head of the table, projecting confidence as he presented the hospital's stellar performance for the quarter. Charts, graphs, and revenue projections flashed on the screen behind him, designed to impress and reassure investors. He spoke smoothly, highlighting profits, new expansions, and future acquisitions. Completely unaware of the storm about to erupt in the quiet corner of the room, Li Mei's heart pounded as she listened. Every word of Mr. Zhang's presentation, echoing in her mind alongside the evidence she had compiled. She could see the smug pride on his face, the arrogance of a man who believed himself untouchable. She had rehearsed this moment countless times, thinking of how she might subtly alert someone without revealing herself prematurely. Her gaze fell on the CFO, a senior accountant who had always been courteous to her, though distant. Gathering her courage, Li Mei leaned slightly toward him and whispered, barely audible, "The surgeries on these invoices never happened." The CFO froze, his pen hovering above his notepad. At first he thought he had misheard, but then he glanced at the folder, recognizing the meticulous documentation she had prepared. His eyes widened in shock as he realized the implications. This wasn't a minor clerical error. It was a deliberate and massive scam, orchestrated at the highest level of the hospital. The room remained oblivious for a moment, but the CFO's expression shifted. He began scanning the documents, comparing them to the reports Mr. Zhang was presenting. Slowly, his fingers traced line after line, revealing the same pattern Li Mei had discovered. Phantom patients, inflated invoices, and mysterious payments to shell companies all pointed to a betrayal that threatened the hospital. As reputation and financial stability, the tension in the boardroom became palpable as the CFO subtly nudged Li Mei's folder across the table for another executive to review. Murmurs spread through the room as others began to notice discrepancies that had previously gone unnoticed. Mr. Zhang, sensing something amiss, paused mid-sentence, his confident demeanor faltering. The color drained from his face as he glimpsed the growing realization in the executive's eyes. Li Mei sat silently, her pulse racing, watching as the chain reaction unfolded. Her whisper, soft and almost invisible, had set in motion a reckoning that no one, not even the CEO, had anticipated. The room's energy shifted from admiration to shock. As the executive slowly grasped the enormity of the fraud, she realized, with a mixture of fear and relief, that her quiet diligence, the work she had done behind the scenes, was finally having an impact. One simple sentence, spoken softly in Mandarin, had begun to unravel the elaborate scheme that Mr. Zhang had believed untouchable. The seeds of justice had been planted, and the hospital's walls would never again shield corruption in the same way. The day after the boardroom revelation, the hospital was a whirlwind of activity. Auditors, police officers, and government regulators had descended upon the building, their presence filling the sterile corridors with an air of tension and urgency. Li Mei watched from her corner office as men and women in suits carried briefcases and clipboards, asking pointed questions and examining files. The usually quiet hospital had become a hive of scrutiny. Its ordinary operations slowed to a crawl. As authorities delved into the financial records, Li Mei's heart was a mixture of anxiety and cautious pride. She had never imagined that her quiet diligence would trigger such a massive investigation, yet she knew it was necessary. Patients, families, and staff all looked on with a mixture of curiosity and concern, unaware of the full extent of the corruption that had been taking place behind the hospital's polished facade. Li Mei's meticulous documentation became the backbone of the inquiry. Every phantom surgery, every inflated invoice, every offshore transaction she had discovered was scrutinized and verified by the auditors. The investigators traced the flow of funds, connecting the hospital accounts to shell companies and eventually to the CEO's personal offshore accounts. The evidence was irrefutable. This was not a minor error or a few isolated missteps. It was a deliberate, calculated scheme orchestrated at the highest level. Mr. Zhang, once confident and untouchable, found himself under intense questioning. His usual charm and composure faltered as the authorities pieced together the network of fraud. Li Mei observed silently, her shyness keeping her on the sidelines. But inwardly she felt vindicated. The work she had once feared to expose had now become the centerpiece of a scandal that could no longer be ignored. Her colleagues, who had long overlooked her quiet nature, now regarded her with astonishment and respect. Whispers filled the hallways about the shy accountant who blew the whistle, as people realized that the unassuming young woman in the corner had been the key to uncovering a multi-million yuan scam. For Li Mei, however, the recognition was secondary to the sense of justice being served. She attended meetings with auditors and regulators, answering questions and clarifying details, her voice calm but precise. Every answer she gave reinforced the credibility of the evidence she had collected, and each confirmation from the authorities solidified the narrative of fraud that had once seemed so impossible to confront. The media soon caught wind of the scandal, and the hospital became the center of national attention. Reporters highlighted the scope of the fraud, emphasizing the role of whistleblowers in exposing corporate corruption. Li Mei's courage, though understated, became a symbol of integrity and vigilance in the face of overwhelming odds. Meanwhile, the hospital's operations began to stabilize under interim management as Mr. Zhang was suspended pending the investigation. Li Mei continued her work, now with a sense of purpose and empowerment. She had learned that courage didn't require loud proclamations or dramatic gestures. Sometimes a careful, persistent dedication to the truth was enough to change the course of events. The investigation marked the beginning of a new chapter, one where transparency and accountability replaced greed and deception, and Li Mei's quiet bravery remained at the heart of it all. Li Mei sat silently, her pulse racing, watching as the chain reaction unfolded. Her whisper, soft and almost invisible, had set in motion a reckoning that no one, not even the CEO, had anticipated. The room's energy shifted from admiration to shock. As the executive slowly grasped the enormity of the fraud, she realized, with a mixture of fear and relief, that her quiet diligence, the work she had done behind the scenes, was finally having an impact. One simple sentence, spoken softly in Mandarin, had begun to unravel the elaborate scheme that Mr. Zhang had believed untouchable. The seeds of justice had been planted, and the hospital's walls would never again shield corruption in the same way.